there never is really, right, one answer to any question, either within Judaism, Islam, or Christianity. There's a whole range of opinions, whether you're Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, whether you're a hardcore evangelical or a liberal Methodist, whether you're a Hanafi, a Maliki, a Hanbali, whatever, there's going to be a range of opinions on things, and so let's think of some really interesting questions and see if we can stump them somehow.
I won't be too tough.
And you can either answer from your seat or come up here if you'd like to, but let's open it up. So, who wants to go first?
Nice job, Dan. Nice job.
Nice job. Yeah. I agree.
Answered all your questions.
We were just so informed.
I don't believe that.
Somebody.
You're just too timid.
Think of something really difficult.
Come on.
Yes.
As you, as a Methodist priest, have you ever had someone who used to be a part of your parish or part of your faith come to you and talk to you about switching to another faith, not just like within Christianity, but like something completely different, like Judaism or Islam? And how do you handle that? And what kind of questions do you ask them to make sure they're serious about the whole thing?
He's asking the question, did anybody ever come to me for counseling about changing their religious faith? My answer is no. But how would I handle that? I think I would listen and help them understand where they are and what their vision for faith was, and if it fit something that I thought would be more compatible for them, I would say you ought to look at this, this, and this. I think you have to decide. You have to live with that. I don't have to live with you. You know, you have to work that out on your own. And if you can give me a vision as to kind of where you're searching, I can point you to groups and you can try them out. I've had people change Methodist churches because they didn't like the preacher, or they didn't like what they were doing in that church. They're going to go to another church, and they do. You know, and I say, welcome. Now, when I was in St. Louis, I tell you, it was cutthroat among some Methodist preachers, because they would get members from other Methodist churches, or they would lose members, and they would be upset with the pastor who accepted their transfer. You know, we can transfer, and that was just, you know, but it was, and to me, if you're not comfortable here, if I'm not answering your questions, and this church is not meeting your needs, your religious and spiritual needs, then let's find a place where you can find satisfaction and ability to serve and to work, and to be a good product in this community. That's my attitude. That's not necessarily a common attitude, I don't think.
More questions? Oh, we've got a whole stack of them.
Yeah, just
Oh, all right.
Why don't do some work?
Hey, I'm putting to work.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's got too easy of a job.
We got the hard ones.
Ooh, this is a good one. All right, excited. Is there a concept similar to the dowry in Christianity and Judaism?
No.
Can I just ask whoever's asking this question, can you clarify if you mean dowry as in what is considered the exchange bride price in South Asian or East Asian cultures, or are you referring to the mahar? Okay, so that needs to be clarified. There's a difference, and Muslims also need to acknowledge this, that there's a clear difference between the dowry of like the South Asian cultures, where the bride's family will, you know, give money and jewelry and furniture and God knows what else in exchange, right? Or as a gift. It's considered a gift. But we know that this is not necessarily a Muslim practice. It's well, I don't want to get into the history of that, but that's very different from what is the mahar. And so with Muslims, at least for almost all four of the major schools of thought, part of what qualifies an Islamic marriage contract is that the man who is proposing will offer her a gift. And some scholars say, well, it has to be a monetary gift, and others say, well, it could be something that's more like some form of work or a Benz or a rock, conflict-free. So, and really, it's there to protect her in the case that she is divorced, or in the case that she is in need of, in the case that the marriage is annulled, that she has enough provision and sustenance to be on her own and care for her needs.
I had an interesting experience one time. We were in Israel, my wife and I, and we were both in Jewish and Islamic cultures, back and forth. And we had one man approach me and say he would give me 5 camels for my wife.
Back into
I got a lovely wife. I'm going to keep her.
That was in 19.
Huh?
When was that?
Oh, that would have been in the 1980s.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
I think he was joking. I appreciated the gesture.
Anywho, so I'm sorry, going back to your question though, they're asking if there's a similar understanding within Judaism or Christianity. Michael, did you want to, or Brian, sorry.
It may be in some of the cultures, some of the Christian sects, but that's pretty well, I think, in the United States, pretty well gone. I'm not aware of that being practiced at all. The old dowry thing left in the 1900s with the rise of women's rights and abilities and that sort of a thing.
I'm not aware of any that I know of.
Although we should add that if you don't offer a ring as a man in the United States, right, she's probably not going to say yes. So.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're still doing that, aren't we?
But I just want to kind of clarify that, again, that the mahar is seen as something that is really in favor of the woman and is there to really protect her rights. To just divorce her and to leave her in a state, and throughout history, and we know that throughout civilizations, most societies have been patriarchal. Yes, there are a few that have differed, but I mean, it's still rare. So when you have women who, for the most part, are always, in essence, in that relationship, are reliant on their husbands, the mahar was really there as a safety net. So even, for example, when I got married, my husband, who is not, a traditional Muslim scholar or anything, and in fact, he was learning Islam as we were, getting closer to the marriage. So, although he was, born and raised a Muslim, he thought the mahar was kind of, I think he was just like, wait, is this a prenup? What is this, And I was like, yeah, I mean, if you choose, God forbid, ever to divorce me, then think of what you gotta pay. No, I'm just kidding. So, and the mahar is usually based off of the family. So like if the family has a certain amount, right? So make sure your cousins are getting, for Muslim girls in here, make sure your cousins are asking for a decent amount, because that becomes kind of your, I'm just kidding. The Prophet, peace be upon him, actually encouraged it to be something that's not burdensome, because he said there's more barakah or more blessing in a marriage that, is not burdening the other.
Just one clarification is, even though there's no question of the divorce, but still the man has to pay this gift, marriage gift.
Yes, thank you.
That's important, yeah, so it's,
Thank you. So, and thank you for bringing that up. The mahar is not necessarily only for, in cases of annulment, but rather for as they're living together. In fact, he's required to also pay something called the nafaqah, which is like, the basic daily needs. So like in Islam, men are responsible for paying rent of the home. Men are responsible for, pretty much my money sits in another account, which my husband has no access to. This is my own personal life being shared here. But the idea that Muslim women have a right over their own money and that their husbands are responsible for their overall sustenance is something that is agreed upon amongst Muslim scholars, and that the mahar is paid over time unless he's not able to afford it. But overall, the idea is that they're living in tranquility, and I don't think any happy or Muslim married couple is sitting there counting when the mahar is coming in every month.
Yes.
Just wanted to make a comment on that. Based is so it's I think it's other than the mahar in the Islamic thing, because the question was whether there is anything similar in Christianity or in Judaism. The answer to that would be perhaps it's more cultural, as we were referring to, as you started to say in the Middle East, or in the Southeast or the Far Eastern. It's also there in the Middle East, but it's a reverse mahar. The reason I bring that up is from my experience of now working in African societies for about 4 years. What I find is it's the reverse thing. No matter, majority of the people that I work around are Christians, and then yet before every marriage, a man has to prepare. Particularly interesting in southern Sudan was the number of cattle that you would have to offer to the bride's family. And then, yes, that's how the wealth was measured in South Sudan, the cattle, not land. So the higher the woman's family status is, more number of cows you will have to get them. And then also the taller the bride is, more cows she gets. So basically what it is more cultural, and I find it interesting that it's in African cultures, no matter whether you're a Muslim or a Christian, there are certain practices which are common to all faiths, and this is one of those.
And I would just piggyback on that a lot of the work that I have done is on medieval Judaism in Cairo and Syria. And in both the wedding contracts from medieval Egypt and Syria, you see a lot of very similar kinds of things. So you'll have the woman's family will write into the contract that she's going to get XYZ, goods and services built into the marriage in case of an annulment or something, that she'll be protected. And you see it both ways, and it's very interesting to see that a lot of this stuff gets built here. Yeah, it's very nice, similar. All right, next question. This is going to be a tough one. Are you ready? What are Muslim views on Shia-Sunni marriage?
I can't answer that.
That's an interesting question. Who asked that question, by the way?
The whole point of them.
Oh, no. If you want to, if you choose to remain anonymous, that's fine. Okay. So, are you asking in terms of what is kind of like the consensus on it?
Sure.
Oh, okay. So actually, it was one of you, right? Okay. Sorry, I'd like to know who's asking the question, if that's okay.
On paper because they don't want to.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Okay. Well, we have other scholars here that can actually address that, but probably better than I can. But my understanding is that the aqidah, or what is considered the belief of the person that is being married, whether it's the bride or groom, has to be from the perspective of the Ahli Sunnah wa Jama'ah, which are basically Sunni, the Sunni school of thought. Their perspective is that the aqidah has to be the same, meaning belief in one God, and that Muhammad ﷺ is the final messenger. And so if there's any change in that, because as we know in some Shia sects, there's a belief that goes as far as saying that even that Ali radiallahu anh was supposed to be receiving revelation rather than Rasulullah ﷺ. I mean, it can go as far to that. So as long as the aqidah of this person is what is considered the aqidah of a Muslim, the belief of a Muslim, then majority of Muslim scholars have permitted that. Now, in terms of individual practices of certain, because for most Shias today, and again, I know I'm generalizing to a certain extent because I'm not a scholar on Shia theology. But for what we know, many Shias are Shia through as Jews are, in terms of a tradition of, well, in the perspective that you presented, and correct me if I heard it any different, that it's considered part of your ethnicity as well, that it's being passed as a, from one generation to another. And so for many Shias, they're not very different necessarily in their aqidah than Sunnis are, but this has become almost like an ethos for them throughout time of what happened in terms of the political differences. So I guess the simple answer is that the aqidah has to be questioned. Like, what does this person actually believe? And in terms of their practice, what do they practice? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
So if you're looking into marrying a Shia student here, no, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
And I mean, just from my own experience living in Damascus, where there is a pretty broad range of Muslims living in Damascus, it's very rare, but I did know Sunnis and Shiis that were married, and it was not an issue, at least not, I mean, from the outside. Anyway, maybe they fought at home, I don't know. Next question. How should one deal with children in interfaith marriage? What religion should they follow?
I guess I spoke about it a little bit at the end of my presentation, but I don't know who's asking the question, but are you asking from an outsider's perspective, like how should a teacher deal with a child, or how should, obviously we're not talking from the parents' perspective because the parents are bringing them up. So I think children of at least in the Jewish faith, of interfaith marriages, I would assume should just be treated like everyone else when it comes to normal societal things. And I think when, as I said earlier, when they become old enough to kind of choose their own path, at least in the Jewish tradition, what Jews are hopeful is that they will choose to continue a path of Judaism. Obviously that isn't always the case, but I feel like in this day and age, I'd say more children of interfaith marriages who are being raised both Jewish and the other faith, at least they're being opened to Judaism, and hopefully they are following a path towards becoming a Jewish adult. And what I'm hopeful, just speaking from the example of my sister, I'm hopeful that my niece and nephew will continue their Jewish education, and hopefully when they become old enough, to make choices on their own, that they will, like I said, continue that path and hopefully raise their children Jewish. But how you treat them, I would say, just to be treated like either they are Jewish or they're not Jewish. Just treat them normally like you would treat any other child. I hope that kind of answered the question, but I'm not sure.
Again, that will depend upon who sits down to counsel with them. I hate to be so wishy-washy here, but if you're talking about Christianity over the whole broad range, there would be plenty who would not. But for those who had an interfaith marriage, again, I would ask the question, which would be most beneficial? To raise them in one specific or the other, or to raise them simultaneously in both? In other words, expose them. In my way of thinking, it's not fair to immerse one child in a particular religion on a regular basis, and the other and on other times immerse that child in sporadic expressions of the other faith. I think that has to be timed out to where they have to have a basis for making the decision. And just to let a person go anyway is difficult. Now, I will share with you that we have a young lady, a high school girl, who comes to our church, started last fall, started coming on her own. Her parents had no religious background. They said to her, go find out on your own. And so she started, interestingly enough, she says, I started out to go around to the different churches. I started here, and I like it here, and I'm going to stay. You know, well, okay. But see, if she'd have chosen a different church, that same thing might have happened there to her. So and so much of it, you raise your child in your way of thinking, and they may become a member of that church or that faith, and they meet somebody else, or their peers that they become associated with move in an entirely different direction. And they, at least among Christians, they will very often change to that because of peer pressure. And peer influence is often much stronger than parental influence, especially at the adolescent age, because that's when they're exploring, that's when they're rebelling against lifestyles the way it is, and so it's, you know, it's intercultural, and the way you grow up and mature. Okay.
So this is all theoretical because I don't have kids yet, and so I acknowledge that those of you in the audience who have kids, I think, may differ on any of the suggestions or reflections that were offered. From a clearly legalistic perspective, Muslims in Islam are required this is the consensus, that they're required to, you know, there's a hadith of the Prophet that between when the child is young, all the way up to puberty, that you're supposed to establish rituals of Islam, right? You're supposed to continuously educate them and provide the kind of care and love and affection and compassion that allows them to grow in their rituals. And then once the child reaches puberty, the Prophet peace be upon him told Muslims, Muslim parents, to befriend this child, their children, so that they become more aware and they're able to, you know, find their own spiritual identity, and that it's not coerced on them or or that you're not necessarily indoctrinating them. So now, having said that, it's already, you know, considered like as part of their responsibility as Muslim parents. Now, in the state where you have a Muslim man who is married to a chaste Christian or Jewish woman, that contract in itself, one of the requirements of that is that they will be able to raise their children in the state of Islam. That's actually considered one of the legal requirements. What we know, though, is that from studies that were done in Indonesia that I mentioned earlier in my talk, that, you know, in the 1980s they passed under personal laws, they required that they actually stopped allowing interfaith marriages because they realized that many of the households where women were of another faith than Islam were actually raising their kids in the faith of, the children chose the faith of their mother. And there's still studies on it in terms of, there are some behavioral psychologists that are studying that to see, well, what was the reason for that? Is it because children are more inclined towards the faith of their